Welcome, everyone. My name is Holly Hammond, CMO here at Automox, and our mission is to raise the world's security confidence. You have joined our monthly webinar where we review Microsoft Patch Tuesday. I'd like to introduce you to Bryan Gale, the Chief Product Officer here at Automox. He's been in the industry for 20 years, working in enterprise product management, product marketing, and security expertise, and he currently leads the security and product direction for Automox. Prior to joining Automox, Bryan was Chief Product Officer at CyberGRX, and he was also the VP of Product and Technical Marketing globally for Cylance. He's also held leadership roles at McAfee and Webroot, and we're super happy to have him here. Bryan, thanks so much for joining us, and I'm going to hand the webinar over to you.
Thank you so much, Holly. Good morning, everyone on the West Coast, and good afternoon to those of you a little further east of us here in Colorado. Happy to be joining and be able to walk through a good summary of what transpired with this month's patch and vulnerability disclosures for Microsoft and a host of other third-party products. So the agenda for today, first we're going to give you an overview of February's Patch Tuesday, right? And that primarily covers Microsoft as well as a number of patches and vulnerabilities for Adobe. And then we'll walk through sort of the fundamentals of cyber hygiene and how Automox and our platform helps automate all of the fundamentals for good security cyber hygiene, as well as helping you to automate all of your Patch Tuesday needs on a regular recurring basis every single month. Then we'll do a little bit of a live demo of the Automox platform. So first, let's talk through a summary of what came out this month for Patch Tuesday. This February, we've got a fairly normal release with close to 80 vulnerabilities being patched. The primary targets were the Windows operating system across its various flavors, from the desktop versions to the server installations. We've got a continual favorite of attackers with Internet Explorer getting a zero-day exploit and a patch now available for that. Then we've got a host of Microsoft Office patches, and then we've got a group of Adobe patches that cover both Adobe Flash as well as Acrobat Reader. Now, important to note, of those vulnerabilities, 20 this month get a critical rating from Microsoft. And what this means is that those vulnerabilities are the ones that are likely to be exploited, and more than likely they allow for remote code execution on the corresponding device. Now, as a security best practice, we certainly recommend that you patch all critical vulnerabilities as soon as you're technically able to do so in your environment. And we'll show you here at the end of the webinar how Automox makes that trivial for you to set up and do with the push of a button. In addition to the IE zero-day bug, we also have 4 vulnerabilities that were actually publicly disclosed this month. And what that means is that the requisite knowledge that attackers need in order to craft an exploit for that particular vulnerability is likely or readily available for anyone who's seeking that. That means that they're also likely to be actively exploited soon, if in fact they have not already been. And then, as you know, we've already seen one that's been publicly exploited already with the IE zero-day. So next, let's dive into some of the specific details that are probably most interesting in terms of the patches and vulnerabilities to all of you and your respective enterprises now. Okay. All right, so first off, we've got an interesting zero-day for Internet Explorer that we know is actively being exploited in the wild. Now, while this one was only rated as important by Microsoft, the fact that it's being actively exploited should raise the importance to all of you in terms of getting this patched across your environment, even if your users don't regularly use IE as their default browser. As everyone likely knows, IE continues to contribute a large part of the attack surface for most enterprises because it exists by default on Windows 7, Windows 10, and most all versions of Windows Server. This particular one as well doesn't just impact IE 11, but it also goes back to IE 10 on Windows Server 2012. Now, this one we don't know a tremendous amount of detail about what the actual live exploits and attacks look like on this one, But the vulnerability deals with how IE improperly handles objects in memory. And so if an attacker is able to exploit this vulnerability, Microsoft simply said that they could test for the presence of files on disk. Now, while that in and of itself might not be extremely troubling, little else is really known, and the only thing that a user needs to do in order to get infected is to simply navigate or visit a malicious website, which, as most all of you likely know, is pretty trivial for attackers to be able to initiate and trick users into doing today through phishing or spear phishing, or just poisoning of various websites on across the internet as well. Okay. Next, we've got CVE 2019-0686. And this one is likely to be the one this month that's most interesting, or troublesome, if you will, to most of you across your enterprises. This one is actually an elevation of privilege vulnerability in Microsoft Exchange Server. And what that means is that an attacker who successfully exploits this vulnerability could actually gain the same rights as any other user of the Exchange server. Effectively, what that means in layman's terms is that an attacker can access the mailbox of any single user on the system. So quite troubling if that one gets exploited. To actually exploit this vulnerability, an attacker, what they need to do is execute a man-in-the-middle attack, which forwards an authentication request to a Microsoft Exchange server, thereby allowing for the impersonation of any other Exchange user. This one impacts Exchange Server from the current release, 2019, all the way back to version 2010. Okay. All right, now let's turn our attention to some of the more than 70 vulnerabilities that were patched across the Adobe suite of products this month. Here, just to summarize, are four of the most probably important ones that are probably the most troubling for all of you. The first one, 7089, allows attackers to harvest network credentials. And the other three listed here all allow for arbitrary code execution if an attacker is able to actually exploit them. And remember now that for good security hygiene, you likely don't want your end users to arbitrarily have Flash enabled all of the time. And luckily, for most all of us, most browsers, most of the newer browsers allow for a click-to-play type of enforcement capability. But just due to its massive install base, Flash vulnerabilities are still something to take very, very seriously across your environments. Now we've got just one more thing, for Adobe and Acrobat in particular. This particular one is something that is coming hot off the presses right now. This is something that Adobe actually announced yesterday, where there's a critical security bypass for Acrobat Reader. This one Adobe has deemed is so critical that they're actually releasing an out-of-band patch today at some point outside of their normal patch cycle. And remember that vulnerabilities that are patched out of band are something that the company has seen likely to have active exploits out in the wild, or if it is actively exploited, the dangers that poses to all of you as users is so severe that they do rush a patch out the door outside of their normal patching cycle. So this one, packages should be available shortly. We don't know a whole lot more information about this as we haven't had time to dive in to the Adobe notices that have come out today, but be looking for that one to be available for all of you here shortly. That was the executive summary of the key vulnerabilities we believe are most interesting to all of you. Now I'd like to talk briefly about how Automox can actually help you all automate funnels of what we call security hygiene across your environment. Okay, and so up here we've got four key fundamentals that we feel are absolutely critical for all of you to do across your environment. And this really represents provides the proper foundational base for operating system security and application security in your environment. First, every single system in your environment runs an operating system. That is vulnerable and it has to be patched frequently. This is by and large your largest attack surface in your organization. Second, the software that you run on those endpoints is your next most common attack surface, and also one of the most difficult for you all to stay on top of from a security administration standpoint. And third, and closely related to number two, is the management of third-party software across your environment. And then fourth, last but not least, is the management of your endpoint device configurations. So we'll now touch briefly on how Automox actually helps you in all four of those areas. Okay. First and foremost, why the concept of automation, right? And it's very, very simple and straightforward. Every one of you on the phone is an extremely busy professional that doesn't have a tremendous amount of time in the day. And by automating these four security fundamentals, you reduce the time from threat and threats being divulged to resolution across your environment. It also allows you to ensure that the configurations across all of your devices, across all of your regions globally are identical and following the policies that you wish to dictate and administer across your environment. And then last, it slashes any of the manual efforts that are needed to keep devices compliant with the policies that you want to have in place inside of your organization. Okay. Now, why do many of us not do automation, right? First and foremost, we feel it's too hard, too time-consuming. There's too many different tools that we have to deal with to ensure that we get patches pushed out. Compliance is adhered to across the environment, and we just don't necessarily have trust in some of the security or the technology stack that we've cobbled together, and or it's too cumbersome for us to manage the interplay between all of those. Okay? And so what we want to show you today is how do we free up your time when we actually know and can patch all of your systems and ensure that they're applied or ready for approval in minutes of actually being released. You then know that all of your devices are kept up to date before you even have to check, because you know you have policies in place that provide that coverage and protection for you. And you're able to receive regular reports knowing that you have achieved the right level of compliance that you need inside of your organization, giving you time or freeing back up time in your day to really worry about what is more strategically important to you in your day job, and thus letting you sleep better at night as well as an added bonus. Okay? And so how do we automate security with Automox? First, we'll talk about patching, and I've got kind of 4 more slides here before we'll show you kind of a live demo of how you can go about setting a security policy in place to automatically patch your systems across a range of different needs that you may have in your environment, and then we'll dive into the Q&A. And so first and foremost, let's talk about patching and being able to create a policy to patch your operating system third parties across your environment. This allows you to keep your Windows, your Mac, and your Linux systems patched with either a broad set of rules or a very finely narrow-focused set of rules that is very granular to specific types of systems. We also allow you to patch a number of third-party applications across your environment as well. And then we also provide end users clear information about patches if there's some sort of end user interaction that you desire inside of your environment as well. And here you see a little screenshot of what a patch policy creation looks like within Automox, and we'll dive into the details of that live here momentarily. Next, we'll talk a little bit about required software. And so this is the ability to install any software or application that you want inside of your environment. We automate the installation of that software across all 3 of the core traditional operating systems, Windows, Mac, and Linux. We support any type of installation file, whether it's a disk image file, an RPM, or a Windows MSI or installer. And we also allow you to set regular schedules that ensures that your devices are kept compliant with what policies you want in place inside of your organization. And then next, we have an ability to create custom policies, and that allows you to manage and configure your devices with a very granular level of control. Allows you to review and update any particular single device configuration inside of your environment, see what sort of software is installed on that device, and see what sort of software updates need to be applied into that environment. It allows you to do things like enforce password settings or install files or configure any devices across your environment. And we also support the ability to run things like PowerShell code or Bash scripts inside of your environment as always. And last but not least, we'll talk about how we allow you to scale that automation across your environment as your environment continues to grow as well. This allows you to link policies together, tie different policies to different groups to really automate the concept of cyber hygiene support. That automation allows you to configure or manually run any policy. It can be set to be fully automated, and you can also then manually run any policy at any given point in time as well. Those policies can run on the schedule that you desire, or if you want, there's manual intervention that you can take at any point in time as well. But that likely subsides as you grow to trust and use the Automox platform even more. Okay. All right, so now let's dive into a little bit of a live demo here. So this is the Automox administration console. And I'll touch on a few things here on the dashboard in terms of highlights here. Across the top, the cards give users access to quick information that they need. If you're new to the platform here in this particular environment, it allows me to get started patching my devices. I can see that I've got one newly added device, and I can go and dive into that and make sure I've got the right level of policy set for proper compliance across my environment. Next, I have the ability to add devices. I can do that either by downloading an install file locally, putting that on a network share, or doing that remotely via command line as well. So we support almost an infinite number of ways to get the lightweight agent added to your devices. And then on the far right, you can see this is a demo environment, so I've not actually enabled two-factor authentication. But that's something that we readily support across a wide range of options to ensure that you've got MFA enabled so that only those that you truly want to have access to the system can get that. Now, again, this is a demo environment, so I don't have a tremendous number of machines, but down here is where we would see systems that need approval for some sort of patch that's affecting those devices. Pending patches are those systems that are scheduled to be patched in the very near future, and I've got 3 that are outstanding right now. None of my systems need attention, meaning they don't need a critical reboot, or they're disconnected, or I don't need to do anything to take direct action on those. And then here's where I would see any sort of exceptions within my environment. And then I have some high-level metrics in terms of the number of patches, the type or severity of those patches, and when they've been applied in recent history, as well as some information about those by severity as well. Okay. Next, we're going to dive into what we call our devices page, and this lists all of the devices across your environment. And this is where we're going to drill into a particular device, which is our Demo 1 system here. This grid, will span across thousands of endpoints. You'll be able to quickly find different devices by type, whether it's a set of Linux systems. Maybe you need to address the snappy vulnerability that came out in Ubuntu Linux earlier this week. Or if there's something specific with Windows systems, you can quickly navigate to those. I can also search devices if I have a number of tags that I utilize, whether it's by group or policies that I want to quickly find. But here, for the sake of time with the webinar here, we're going to dive into this Demo 1 instance. And you can see that I've got 4 pending patches for that, and a total of 8 patches overall. And then also high-level status that that system is online and pending. Now, when I drill into the actual device details, I see a high level amount of metadata that's important information about that particular device, the last logged in user, and what policies are actually applied to that particular device. Now, if I scroll down here a little bit lower, I'll see the overall list of installed software on that particular device. And at the very top, I've sorted by severity. I see that this device needs or requires 2 critical security patches. One for Adobe Flash Player for Windows 10, and then the other one for this Microsoft XML, MS-XML 6.0 RTM security update that's needed. Now, the first one you can see is awaiting update. The bottom one has actually already been installed. Now, what awaiting update means is that device is likely going to get this patch during the next scheduled patching cycle based on the timelines that you specify. This is an example where we want to highlight the ability to show that even though you would be protected in an automated fashion for this patch to get updated, I can actually go in and I could physically hit the Patch Now button to make sure that that device gets this software package and gets patched immediately. But for the sake of this webinar, we're not going to do that right now. We're going to go next into the System Management tab on the left here. And System Management for us is where we create policies and apply those policies to different groups within our environment. So policies will appear on the left-hand side here. You see that I have one default patch policy. and that's tied to the single group that I have set up within this environment, which is just my default group. And you can see that I have a unique relationship of 3 devices in that policy and 3 devices within that group. So I know that this little demo environment is totally covered within that single policy and that single group. Okay? But what I want to actually do is very quickly walk you through how you would create a policy dynamically within the Automox platform. And the initial ways that you set this up are the policy type, right? Do I want to patch everything? If I wanted to do that, I would select patch all. I could also do an exception-based rule where I want to patch all systems and all types of patches with certain exceptions. And then down on the lower right is really where you would set up a severity patching schedule, okay? And this is by the criticality rating, if you will, by the OS vendor or the application vendor in terms of how critical that particular patch is, okay? And so I'm going to select by severity here. I'm going to call this policy severity, and I'm not going to automatically reboot the systems, but I can turn that on and enable that. And what that means is your end users would see a notification that you customize, and then the system would force an actual reboot upon patching. Then for the policy scope, this is where I can select the severity of those patches. For the sake of the webinar, I'm just going to patch or select all of them just to show you the different options, right? So from critical all the way down to medium or low or other category. And then where we really give you a fine level of granular control is the schedule for how you want to patch this. And you could set this up, maybe you're a large organization and you have a very defined patch window that's once per quarter. So I could select that, and just for sake of argument, I could say our patch window for Q1 is in February. And so this policy would only run in February in the weeks and the days that I would select. But for this one, since we're focused on Patch Tuesday, I'm going to do something a little bit more granular, and I'm going to select all 12 months of the year. And for the weeks of the year, I'm going to set the second week, since we know that Patch Tuesday is traditionally the second Tuesday of every month. And then for the days that this policy can run, I'm actually going to allow it to run every single day of the week. And my patch timing is going to be 12 a.m. And then I want to also ensure that if a device misses a particular patch window, it's going to be caught the next time that that device actually checks in. And then you can see a preview of the schedule here in terms of when that patch policy is due to run. Since I'm creating this policy now on the 21st and there's not much of the month left, it shows you that I've only really got a few days that patch policy is going to run in the remainder of the year. And so normally, if I look at March, March is going to be different, and it's going to run in that second week of March on a regular basis. Okay? And then I would go ahead and create the policy and apply it. Once that policy is created, I could then assign it to various groups of systems that I have. In my enterprise organization here, I have the one single default group, and so I can assign that. And then if I go back to the system management window, you'll now see, oops, I actually didn't hit the create policy button, but I would see the policy created here and a direct line linking it over to the default group itself. And at that point in time, every system in that default group is now going to have that policy applied based on the criteria that I've selected in terms of all the different severity ratings, and patching it after the second week or the second Tuesday of the month. Okay, so that's how simple it is, and then I've effectively automated the ability to have all of my Patch Tuesday contents applied to my environment on an ongoing fashion where I don't have to lift a finger now at that point, knowing that my systems are protected and going to be continually updated on a regular basis. So now we'll move away from the demo and we'll open things up for Q&A for us in the few minutes that we have left. Okay. So the first question that we have is, are all patches tested? And we do not at Automox physically test every single patch with every single device permutation and set of third-party software. What we do provide is a mechanism for you to create a defined group, which would be your patch testing group. And maybe I have a few systems in that group that have my gold master image or a representative environment for my office network. And that has all of the operating systems I use and the normal traditional third-party software that I use. And that allows me to test any given patch in that small test environment on a regular basis. And so what I would do is I would go in and set a very specific policy that allows me to test that group of systems on a regular basis when I'm ready to evaluate the patches that were just released. And so if Patch Tuesday occurs, I can go into my test environment, I can run a patch all policy against every single system in that test group, and I can evaluate the outcome of those patches. Did I have any failures or otherwise? And after that, then I know with certainty that it works in my environment. I can allow the general policy to be applied across the environment. So we don't actually take on the burden of Q&Aing all of the different patching packages that come out and get released by the various vendors, but we provide you an automated way to test those packages very effectively and ensure that they work within your environment before you apply them more broadly. Okay. Next question is, how can I achieve an automatic reboot for user machines that are locked by the user, i.e. at night? And that is a way, the checkbox that we showed as we walked through the policy to automatically reboot those at the end of the patching policy, that would then occur. Okay, if a system is offline completely, we need to wait for that system to come back online. Let's see, the next question is, how can I best manage Patch Tuesday when I have a wide variety of Windows versions and environments? And this one I would answer in a similar fashion to our patches tested. And the best practices that we follow here is that we at Automox have various test groups for the different types of systems generally that we utilize. We have a server test group, we have a desktop test group, and those are representative of our broader install base. And so we're able to test patches out within those small groups, ensure that they don't break anything in our regular environment before we apply them more broadly to the rest of the ecosystem. We found that that works very well for us, and it's a nice mix of automation as well as affirmation and confirmation that those patches are valid and don't break anything. Some of our customers as well will, and we saw this represented in the poll also, where a lot of users will actually wait, a week or a predetermined number of days once patches are released to ensure that patches aren't re-updated by Microsoft or one of the third-party vendors or providers. Okay. Next question is on reporting. Do we have custom reports and can we create one? We have a kind of a predefined list of reports within the system in terms of compliance, pre-patch reporting so that you know what systems are going to get what patches. And then we do have APIs available to be able to get data into different business intelligence tools or other means of getting the data so that you can slice and dice that your own unique way. Okay. There's a question about multi-tenancy. Our platform is a fully capable SaaS platform. We run on Amazon and their AWS infrastructure, fully multi-tenant capable across the environment from the ground up. We do not support on-prem installations at all. How can you customize the notifications to end users? And we have an ability within the platform where you can type in custom text and an alert type that end users would see, knowing that your system administrator or however you wanted to word that is applying patches and the system will automatically reboot for them. Okay. Next question is, can you patch virtual machines as well? The answer to that is a simple yes. We run a number of virtual machines inside of our environment, as long as that virtual machine is a corresponding operating system that is supported. Any supported version of Linux, Windows, or Mac, it doesn't matter whether it's a virtual instance or a physical piece of hardware. We can fully support that. I'd like to thank everyone for your time today and joining. Hopefully this was valuable to you, and we look forward to seeing you all on next month's webinar. Thank you very much.